The dust devil swirled around her collapsed form at the edge of the cattle trail. And if Kieran Ashford hadn't been riding drag that scorching July afternoon in 1883, she would have died there in the Texas borderlands without anyone ever knowing her name. He saw the heap of faded calico first, thinking it might be discarded fabric or perhaps a dead animal, but something made him rein his horse closer. When he dismounted and crouched beside her, his breath caught. A woman, young, her lips cracked and bleeding, her face so gaunt that her cheekbones stood out like knife edges beneath skin burned dark by the merciless sun. Her cheeks were hollow from hunger, sunken in a way that spoke of weeks without proper food, and her eyes were closed, lashes casting shadows on her emaciated face. She was barely breathing. Kieran pulled his canteen from his belt and carefully tilted her head, letting just a few drops of water touch her parched lips. She didn't respond at first, and panic gripped him. He tried again, this time letting a thin stream flow, and finally her throat convulsed in a swallow. Her eyelids fluttered. "Easy now," he murmured, his rough cowboy hands surprisingly gentle as he supported her head. "Easy. You are safe." Her eyes opened slowly, and they were the color of sage in morning light, green with flecks of gray. They struggled to focus on his face, confusion and fear warring in their depths. "Water," she whispered, the word barely audible. "I know. Slow sips. Too much too fast will make you sick." He held the canteen carefully, letting her drink in small amounts while his mind raced. The cattle drive was still 3 miles ahead, moving steadily toward the Rio Grande. He couldn't leave her here, and she was far too weak to ride alone. When she had drunk enough to ease the worst of her thirst, he asked, "What is your name?" "Priscilla," she managed. "Priscilla Carson." "Kieran Ashford. Can you tell me what happened to you?" Her eyes filled with tears that she seemed too dehydrated to shed. "Wagon train. We were going to California. Raiders came. They killed my father, my brother. Took the horses, the supplies. I ran. I have been walking for days, maybe a week." I lost count. Kieran felt rage burn in his chest at the thought of raiders murdering innocent travelers, but he kept his voice calm. "How old are you, Miss Carson?" 22, she said, and then her eyes widened with sudden fear. "Please, do not leave me here." "I am not leaving you anywhere," Kieran said firmly. He was 26 himself, trail boss of a small outfit driving 300 head of cattle to sell across the border. "But I need to get you on my horse, and I need to catch up with my crew. Can you hold on if I lift you?" She nodded, though he could see the effort it cost her. When he slipped his arms beneath her and stood, he was shocked at how little she weighed. She was tall, or would be if she were standing, but she felt insubstantial as a bird in his arms. He could feel every rib through her dress. Getting her into the saddle while mounting himself proved challenging, but Kieran managed, settling her in front of him where he could keep an arm around her waist to hold her steady. She slumped against his chest, and he could feel the heat of fever radiating from her skin. "Stay with me, Priscilla," he said, urging his horse into a steady lope. "We will get you fed and cared for. Just stay with me." The ride to catch up with the herd seemed to take forever, though it was less than an hour. Priscilla drifted in and out of consciousness, and each time her body went slack, Kieran's heart lurched with fear. He found himself talking to her, telling her about the cattle drive, about the town they were headed to across the border, about anything he could think of just to keep her anchored to the world. When they finally reached the slow-moving herd, his segundo, a grizzled cattleman named Dutch, rode back to meet them. His weathered face creased with concern when he saw Priscilla. "Found her collapsed on the trail," Kieran explained tersely. "Get Cookie to set up early. She needs food and water, and she needs it now." Dutch nodded and galloped ahead without questions. That was one of the things Kieran appreciated about his crew. They trusted his judgment. Cookie, whose real name was Samuel but whom everyone called Cookie because of his role as camp cook, had a fire going and coffee brewing by the time Kieran rode into the temporary camp. The older man took one look at Priscilla and started barking orders. Get her into the shade. I need clean water boiled. Somebody find me a blanket even if it is hotter than Hades out here. She is going into shock. Kieran carried Priscilla to the shade of the supply wagon and laid her gently on the bedroll Cookie had spread out. Her eyes opened again, focusing on him with what looked like gratitude mixed with lingering fear. You are safe, he told her again. Cookie here is the best camp cook in Texas. He will get some food in you. Can't eat, she whispered. Stomach hurts. Cookie knelt beside her with a cup of warm broth. You are going to eat, girl, but we will start easy. This is just beef broth, thin and mild. Small sips like the water. Your body needs fuel. Kieran watched as Cookie coaxed Priscilla to drink, his weathered hands steady and patient. The old cook had seen plenty of hard cases in his years on the trail, but the look on his face said Priscilla's condition shocked even him. While Cookie tended to her, Kieran pulled Dutch aside. What do you think happened? Raiders, most likely. We heard reports of a gang working this territory about 2 weeks back. They hit wagon trains, take everything valuable, kill the men. Dutch's expression was grim. She is lucky you found her. Another day in this heat without water and she would have been gone. She said she has been walking for days, maybe a week. Dutch let out a low whistle. Girl has grit then. Most people would have laid down and died. Kieran glanced back at Priscilla, watching as Cookie helped her take another sip of broth. Something stirred in his chest, an unfamiliar feeling that was part protectiveness, part admiration, and part something else he couldn't quite name. Over the next few hours, Cookie worked his magic. He got a full cup of broth into Priscilla, then some softened hardtack soaked in more broth. She kept it all down, though the effort of eating seemed to exhaust her. By evening, she was sleeping, her breathing deeper and more regular than when Kieran had first found her. He sat nearby while the crew set up camp for the night, unable to tear himself away. He told himself it was just to make sure she was all right, that any decent man would do the same, but he knew it was more than that. Even gaunt and fever-stricken, there was something compelling about her. Maybe it was the strength it must have taken to survive what she had survived. Maybe it was the color of her eyes. Maybe it was simply that she needed help, and he was a man who couldn't turn away from someone in need. When full dark fell, and the stars blazed overhead in that vast Texas sky, Priscilla woke again. Kieran was still sitting nearby, and her eyes found him immediately in the firelight. You are still here, she said, her voice stronger than before. Where else would I be? I thought maybe I dreamed you, a man appearing when I was dying. It seemed too good to be true. I am real enough. How do you feel? She considered the question. Weak, hungry, but better. Your cook is very kind. Cookie takes in strays. I think he was a stray himself once. Kieran moved closer, settling cross-legged beside her bedroll. Are you up for eating more? I think so. I do not want to be ungrateful, but I feel like I could eat an entire cow. He smiled, the first genuine smile he had felt in hours. Well, we have got 300 of them, so you are in luck. Let me get Cookie. Cookie brought her a plate of beans and salt pork, cut into small pieces along with a biscuit. Easy does it, he warned. Your stomach has shrunk. Eat slow, and if you start feeling sick, you stop. Understand? Priscilla nodded and took the plate with hands that trembled slightly. Kieran watched as she ate, saw the way she forced herself to go slowly when he could tell every instinct screamed at her to devour the food as fast as possible. She had discipline, this woman, control, even in extremity. Tell me about yourself, she said between bites. It seems only fair since you saved my life. Not much to tell. I am a cattleman. I run small drives like this one, buy cattle cheap in Texas, sell them across the border or up north where the price is better. I have been doing it for 5 years now, ever since I saved up enough money to buy my first herd. You seem young to be a trail boss. 26. Old enough. He studied her face in the firelight, noting how the food was already bringing a bit of color back to her cheeks. What about you? You said you were going to California. The light faded from her eyes. My father had a claim to some land near Sacramento. After my mother died last year, he decided we should start fresh, build something new. My brother Thomas was excited about it. He was only 19, full of dreams about striking gold or building an empire. Her voice caught. Now they are both dead and I am the only one left. I am sorry, so am I. She set down her half-empty plate. I cannot eat any more right now. That is all right, you did well. Cookie will have more for you in a few hours. She looked at him directly, those sage-colored eyes full of questions. What happens to me now? I have no family, no money, nowhere to go. I do not even know where I am. You are about 30 miles from the Rio Grande in South Texas. We are driving these cattle to sell them in a town called Piedras Negras, just across the border. After that, I usually take my crew back up to San Antonio to rest and resupply before the next drive. And me? Kieran hesitated. He had been thinking about this question since he found her, and he still didn't have a good answer. I will not abandon you if that is what you are asking. You can travel with us to Piedras Negras. After that, we will figure something out. Maybe find you work or a family that needs help. Something to get you back on your feet. Why? The question was simple but loaded with meaning. Why help me? You do not know me. I am nothing to you. You are a person who needed help. That is enough. He stood, suddenly uncomfortable with the intensity of her gaze. You should sleep more. We have a long day tomorrow. But as he walked away to check on the herd, he could feel her eyes following him, and that strange feeling in his chest grew stronger. The next morning, Cookie had Priscilla eat again before the crew moved out. More broth, more softened bread, and this time a few pieces of dried apple. She kept it all down and seemed steadier on her feet when Kieran helped her up. We need to get you into the supply wagon, he told her. I would put you on my horse again, but you need rest more than anything, and Cookie's wagon has space. She looked embarrassed. I am causing so much trouble. No trouble. We have been making this drive for years. We know how to adapt. Cookie grumbled good-naturedly about having company, but made space for Priscilla among the supplies, patting a spot with blankets where she could lie down if needed. As the day wore on and the cattle moved steadily southward, Kieran found himself riding back to check on her more often than necessary. Each time he brought something. Water, a piece of hard candy, a bandana soaked in cool water for her forehead. She accepted each offering with quiet gratitude, and gradually they began to talk. Not about the trauma she had survived or the uncertain future ahead, but about smaller things. Books they had read, places they had seen, the way the sunset painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson. I never thought I would find beauty in Texas, Priscilla admitted on the third day. She was sitting up in the wagon, strong enough now to stay upright for hours at a time. But there is something about this land. It is harsh, but it is honest. That is a good way to put it. Kieran rode alongside the wagon, his horse matching the plodding pace of Cookie's mules. Texas does not lie to you. It shows you exactly what it is, and either you can handle it or you cannot. I am not sure I can handle it, she said quietly. Everything that happened, losing my family, nearly dying out there. Sometimes I wake up and I cannot believe I am still alive. But you are. That counts for something. She looked at him, and in her eyes he saw both fragility and steel. "It counts because you found me. Because you did not just ride past. Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said with certainty. "They would not have, and we both know it." That night when they made camp, Cookie declared Priscilla ready for a full meal. He served her a plate piled with beans, meat, biscuits, and even a helping of the canned peaches he had been saving. Kieran sat with her while she ate and watched with satisfaction as she cleaned her plate. "Better?" he asked. "So much better. I think I am finally starting to feel human again." She set the plate aside and wrapped her arms around her knees. "Kieran, I need to thank you properly. You saved my life, and I have done nothing but be a burden to your crew." "You are not a burden. You are kind to say so, but I know the truth. I am slowing you down, eating your supplies, taking up space in the wagon. But I promise you, I will find a way to repay you, whatever it takes, once we reach Piedras Negras." He felt a strange pang at the thought of her leaving to find work elsewhere. "You do not owe me anything, Priscilla. I owe you everything. My life, literally." Before he could respond, Dutch called out that it was Kieran's turn for night watch. He excused himself and rode out to circle the herd, but his thoughts stayed with Priscilla. In just a few days, she had become part of the rhythm of the drive. He found himself listening for her voice, looking for her face. When she smiled, which was rare but becoming more frequent, it felt like the sun breaking through clouds. He was in trouble, and he knew it. He barely knew this woman. She was vulnerable, recovering from trauma, dependent on him for survival. It would be wrong to feel anything for her beyond compassion and the desire to help. But his heart, it seemed, had different ideas. They reached the Rio Grande 2 days later, the muddy river sliding past like a brown serpent through the scrubland. Crossing with the cattle took most of the afternoon, and by the time they made camp on the Mexican side, everyone was exhausted. But there was an air of celebration too, because Piedras Negras was only 2 days away, and that meant the end of the drive, payment for the cattle, and a few days of rest before the journey back. Priscilla had been walking for short stretches now, her strength returning day by day. Cookie still made sure she ate until she was full at every meal, and the hollowness had begun to fade from her cheeks. She was beautiful, Kieran realized. Not in the delicate way of pampered town women, but in a way that spoke of character and resilience. That evening, she came to sit beside him while he cleaned his tack, settling on the ground with the easy grace of someone growing comfortable in her surroundings. "Cookie says we will be in Piedras Negras soon," she said. 2 days, barring any problems. "And then you will go back to San Antonio." "That is the plan." She was quiet for a moment, her fingers plucking at the fabric of her dress. Someone, probably Cookie, had found her a change of clothes from the supplies, so she was no longer wearing the tattered calico she had nearly died in. "What if I came with you? To San Antonio, I mean." Kieran's hand stilled on the leather. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because I feel safe with you, with your crew. And because San Antonio is a real city, is it not? There would be more opportunities for work there than in a border town." She was right, of course. San Antonio was booming, full of new businesses and settlers. A woman like Priscilla, hardworking and educated, could find respectable employment there. A dress shop, maybe, or as a governess for some wealthy family's children. But the thought of her leaving to work for strangers made something twist painfully in his chest. "You could come," he heard himself say. "If that is what you want, we have got room." Her face lit up, and that smile nearly undid him. "Thank you. I promise I will earn my keep. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, whatever you need." "You do not have to do that." "I want to. Please, Kieran, let me feel useful. Let me be more than just someone you rescued." How could he say no to that? "All right. You can help Cookie." He is always complaining about how much work he has to do. Cookie complains about everything, she said with a laugh. But I think he enjoys it. They fell into comfortable silence, and Kieran returned to his work while Priscilla sat nearby. It felt natural having her there, like something that had always been, but that he was only now noticing. Piedras Negras was a dusty town straddling the border, full of cattle buyers, merchants, and people moving between countries. Kieran sold the herd for a good price to a buyer he had worked with before, and then paid his crew their shares. It was honest work, and while it would never make him rich, it allowed him to save money steadily toward his dream of buying his own ranch someday. While the crew enjoyed a couple of days off, taking advantage of the town's cantinas and card games, Kieran found himself spending his time with Priscilla. He bought her a proper dress, new boots, and a hat to keep the sun off her face. He told himself it was just practical, that she needed these things, but the truth was he liked seeing her in clothes that fit, liked the way her eyes sparkled when he presented her with a bolt of blue fabric that matched the Texas sky. "This is too much," she protested, but he could see she was pleased. "You cannot travel back to San Antonio in rags. People would talk. People are going to talk anyway. A single woman traveling with a cattle crew, it is not exactly proper. Then we will tell them you are my sister." She laughed outright at that. "Do I look anything like your sister would look?" "I do not have a sister, so who is to say?" They were standing in the general store, surrounded by bolts of fabric and tinned goods, and suddenly the space between them felt charged with something unspoken. Priscilla's smile faded, replaced by an expression Kieran couldn't quite read. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked quietly. "And please do not say it is just because I needed help. There is more to it, I can tell." He should have lied, should have deflected. Instead, he found himself saying, "Because I care about you. Because in these past few days, you have become important to me. And I know that is probably not what you want to hear, given everything you have been through, but it is the truth." She stared at him, and for a moment he thought he had made a terrible mistake. Then, slowly, she smiled. Not the polite smile she gave Cookie or the crew, but something warmer, deeper, more personal. "That is exactly what I wanted to hear," she said. "Because I feel the same way. I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other. But Kieran, you gave me back my life, and now I cannot imagine not having you in it." He reached out and took her hand, right there in the general store with the proprietor pretending not to watch. Her fingers were small in his, calloused now from the rough travel, but they fit perfectly. "When we get to San Antonio," he said, "I am going to court you properly, with all the time and respect you deserve. I am going to take you to dinner, walk with you in the plaza, introduce you to everyone I know. I am going to do this right." "I look forward to it," she said softly. The journey back to San Antonio took 2 weeks, following established trails north through Texas. It was easier than the cattle drive, just the crew and their horses and the supply wagon. Priscilla rode her own horse now, a gentle mare that Kieran had bought for her in Piedras Negras. She had turned out to be a decent rider, though she admitted it had been years since she had been on a horse regularly. They traveled through small towns and wide open spaces, through mesquite thickets, and across shallow rivers. At night, they made camp under the stars, and Kieran found reasons to sit near Priscilla, to talk to her about everything and nothing. He learned that she could read Latin, and that she had wanted to be a teacher before her mother died. He learned that she was afraid of snakes but loved thunderstorms. He learned that she had a sharp wit and a laugh that made his heart skip beats, and she learned about him too. About the ranch he dreamed of owning, somewhere with good water and grass, where he could raise cattle and horses and build something lasting. about the parents he had lost to fever when he was 18, and how he had been on his own ever since. About the loneliness that came with being a trail boss, always moving, never settling, keeping his distance from others because it was easier than forming attachments that would be broken the next time he rode out. "But you are not keeping your distance from me," she pointed out one evening. "No," he agreed, "I am not. You are different." How, he thought about it, trying to put feelings into words. "You make me want to stop moving, to put down roots, to have someone to come home to." "That is a big responsibility to put on someone you have known for less than a month." "I know." "If it is too much, tell me. I will back off." She reached over and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "It is not too much. It is exactly right." Dutch cleared his throat loudly from the other side of the campfire, and they broke apart, both blushing. The crew had figured out what was happening between them, of course. It would have been impossible to hide. But to their credit, no one said anything disrespectful. If anything, they seemed pleased, as if they had decided Kieran deserved some happiness. San Antonio rose from the prairie like a promise kept, its whitewashed buildings and church spires visible for miles. It was late August by then, and the heat was still brutal, but there was something about the city that made it feel like a fresh start. Kieran set Priscilla up in a respectable boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson, paying for 2 months in advance over Priscilla's protests. Then he took her shopping for more clothes, for books, for everything she might need to be comfortable while he figured out their next steps. "You are spending all your money on me," she said, but she looked pleased. "Not all of it. I have been saving for years. I can afford to spend a little. This is more than a little. Then consider it an investment in our future." The word future hung in the air between them, full of implication and promise. They were standing on the plaza, watching children chase pigeons while vendors sold fruit and flowers from carts. It was a scene of ordinary life, peaceful and normal, and Kieran wanted it more than he had ever wanted anything. "Kieran," Priscilla said carefully, "what exactly are we doing here? I mean, I know you said you wanted to court me properly, but where does this lead? What do you want from this?" "From me?" He turned to face her directly, taking both her hands in his. "I want to marry you. I know it is soon. I know some people will say we are crazy. But Priscilla, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are what I have been looking for, even before I knew I was looking." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I want that too, so much. But are you sure? You barely know me. What if you get tired of me? What if I am not what you think I am? I know enough. I know you are strong and brave. I know you survived something that would have killed most people. I know you make me laugh, and that when I think about the future, you are in it." He wiped her tears away with his thumbs. "I am not saying we should get married tomorrow. Take time, let me court you, get to know me better, but I want you to know my intentions are serious." "Then yes," she said. "Yes to all of it. To courting, to time, to whatever comes next. Because I love you, Kieran. I know that is fast too, but it is true. I think I started loving you the moment you gave me water in the desert." He kissed her then, right there in the plaza with people walking past and the sun beating down. It was not his first kiss, but it felt like it. Felt like every romantic notion he had ever dismissed was suddenly, undeniably real. The next 3 months were the happiest of Kieran's life. He courted Priscilla with old-fashioned determination, taking her to dances and church socials, walking with her in the evening when the heat eased, bringing her flowers and books, and anything else he thought might make her smile. She got a job helping at a dress shop, insisting that she needed to do something productive with her days, and quickly became popular with the customers for her skill with needle and thread. They learned each other's rhythms and quirks. Kieran discovered that Priscilla sang when she was happy, soft melodies under her breath, that reminded him of church hymns and folk songs. Priscilla learned that Kieran was up before dawn every day out of habit, and that he was most thoughtful in the evenings when the world quieted down and there was time to reflect. They talked about their future in concrete terms. The ranch Kieran wanted to buy, where they would build it, what kind of cattle they would raise. Priscilla surprised him by suggesting they also grow vegetables and maybe keep chickens, turning it into a real homestead instead of just a cattle operation. "I want it to be a place where people feel welcome," she said. "Where travelers can stop and rest, where neighbors can come for help if they need it. A real home, not just a business." "That sounds perfect," Kieran said and meant it. In November, with the first cool breezes of autumn bringing relief from the summer heat, Kieran proposed officially. He took Priscilla to a hill overlooking San Antonio at sunset and got down on one knee with a simple gold band he had bought from a jeweler downtown. "Priscilla Carson," he said, "you came into my life when I least expected it and changed everything. I cannot imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me?" She pulled him to his feet and kissed him before answering. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in December, in the same church where they had attended services together for months. Cookie stood up as Kieran's best man, grumbling about having to wear a suit but looking pleased nonetheless. Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house helped Priscilla prepare, lending her a veil that had been in her family for generations. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, and when the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Kieran felt something lock into place in his chest, like a puzzle piece he hadn't known was missing. The reception was held at the boarding house, with food provided by Cookie and attended by the crew and the friends they had made in San Antonio. Dutch made a toast that was equal parts sentimental and ribald, making Priscilla blush and Kieran laugh. As the evening wore on and people danced to music provided by a local fiddler, Kieran pulled his wife, aside for a moment alone. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought I could be," she said. "When I was dying in that desert, I thought my life was over. I never imagined I would find you. We found each other, and I am never letting you go." They spent their wedding night at the boarding house, in the room that had been Priscilla's for the past few months. It was their first time being truly alone together, and there was nervousness mixed with anticipation. But Kieran was gentle, patient, and Priscilla was brave, and they discovered together what it meant to become one person instead of two. In the morning, they began planning their future in earnest. Kieran had been scouting land for months, and he had found a perfect spot about 40 miles west of San Antonio. It was 200 acres with a creek running through it, good grass, and enough timber to build a house and barn. The price was fair, and with the money he had saved from years of cattle drives, he could afford it with some left over for stock and supplies. They moved out to the land in early spring of 1884, living in a tent while Kieran and a few hired men built the house. Priscilla cooked for everyone, keeping them fed and organized while also planning the garden she would plant once the house was finished. It was hard work, exhausting in a way that cattle driving had never been, but it was also deeply satisfying because they were building something permanent, something that would last. The house took shape over the course of 3 months. It was not fancy, just 4 rooms with a kitchen and a sleeping loft, but it was solid and weathertight, with a porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset. Priscilla declared it perfect, and Kieran, seeing it through her eyes, had to agree. They bought 50 head of cattle and 24 chickens to start, along with a milk cow and a breeding pair of hogs. Kieran hired a young man named Samuel to help with the heavy work, and Priscilla threw herself into creating the homestead she had envisioned. By summer, they had a thriving vegetable garden, a chicken coop that actually kept the foxes out, and a barn that housed their small but growing herd. Life settled into a rhythm. Kieran worked from before dawn until after dusk, tending cattle, fixing fence, breaking horses. Priscilla ran the household, but she also worked alongside him when needed, proving herself as capable with a lasso as she was with a cooking pot. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and talk about their day, making plans, sharing dreams, simply being together. In September, Priscilla told him she was pregnant. They were sitting at the dinner table and she delivered the news casually as if commenting on the weather. "I am going to have a baby. Sometime in the spring, I think." Kieran nearly dropped his fork. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be. I have missed 2 cycles now and I have been feeling sick in the mornings." Mrs. Patterson said those were the signs. He came around the table and pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed with emotion. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" she asked, and he could hear the slight tremor of anxiety in her voice. "Happy does not begin to cover it. Priscilla, you have given me everything. A home, a purpose, a future. And now this. I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I am grateful every single day." She relaxed against him, and he felt her smile against his chest. "I am glad, because I am terrified and excited in equal measure, and I need you to be strong enough for both of us." "I will be," he promised. "Whatever you need, whenever you need it, I am here." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Priscilla struggled with tiredness and nausea in the early months. Kieran did everything he could to make her comfortable, taking over the heavier household tasks, bringing her tea and crackers when the morning sickness was bad, holding her when she cried from frustration and hormones. As winter eased into spring, Priscilla's belly swelled and Kieran found himself in awe of the whole process. He would lie with his hand on her stomach in the evenings, feeling the baby kick and turn, marveling at the life they had created together. "What should we name it?" Priscilla asked one evening. "If it is a boy, I always liked the name Caleb. My grandfather's name, Caleb Ashford. That sounds strong, and if it is a girl, you choose." "You are doing all the hard work," she laughed. "If it is a girl, I want to name her Ruth. It was my mother's name." "Ruth Ashford. That is beautiful." The baby came on a warm April morning in 1885, arriving with the speed and determination that Kieran had come to expect from anything connected to Priscilla. The local midwife barely had time to arrive before Priscilla was pushing, and within a few hours, they had a son. Kieran held Caleb for the first time with shaking hands, staring down at the tiny red face in wonder. He had done dangerous things in his life, ridden wild horses, faced down angry bulls, but nothing had prepared him for the overwhelming terror and love of holding his own child. "He is perfect," he whispered. "He is loud," Priscilla said tiredly, but she was smiling. "Just like his father." As Caleb grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Kieran's reputation as an honest cattleman spread, and he found himself with more business than he could handle. He hired more help, expanding the herd and the grazing land, always reinvesting profits back into the operation. Priscilla's garden became legendary in the area, and she started selling produce and preserves at the market in San Antonio, adding her own income to the household. They were busy, often exhausted, but they were happy. The homestead Priscilla had envisioned became reality, with neighbors stopping by regularly for advice, to borrow tools, or simply to share a meal and conversation. Kieran and Priscilla became pillars of the small community growing up around them, respected and loved in equal measure. When Caleb was 2, Priscilla announced she was pregnant again. This time, Kieran was less shocked and more simply pleased, already looking forward to expanding their family. The pregnancy was harder than the first, with Priscilla suffering from backaches and swollen ankles. But she never complained, just pushed through with the same determination that had kept her alive in the desert all those years ago. Their daughter was born in November of 1887, coming into the world during a rare cold snap that frosted the windows and made the house feel especially cozy. They named her Ruth, as Priscilla had always wanted, and she was everything her brother was not: quiet, contemplative with her father's dark eyes and her mother's delicate features. Kieran held Ruth while Priscilla rested and felt his heart expand impossibly further. 2 children, a thriving ranch, a wife he loved more every day. It was more than he had ever dreamed of that day he found Priscilla collapsed on the trail. "You remember when you asked me why I stopped to help you?" he said softly, rocking Ruth as she dozed. Priscilla opened her eyes, smiling tiredly. "I remember. I said it was just the right thing to do, but I think it was more than that. I think it was fate. The universe putting me exactly where I needed to be, exactly when I needed to be there, so I could find the person I was meant to spend my life with." "That is very romantic for a cowboy," she teased. "You have made me romantic, among other things." She laughed, then winced. "Come here. Bring our daughter and lie with me." He did, settling carefully beside her on the bed with Ruth cradled between them. Caleb was napping in the next room, the ranch was quiet, and for a moment, everything was perfect. The years passed in a blur of hard work and simple joys. The children grew, Caleb becoming a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the ranch work from the ground up. Ruth was quieter but no less determined, showing an early aptitude for figures that made Kieran suspect she would be the one to manage the business side of things when she was older. In 1890, Priscilla became pregnant for a 3rd time, surprising both of them since they had assumed their family was complete. This pregnancy was the hardest yet, and there were moments when Kieran feared for her health. But Priscilla refused to slow down, insisting that she was fine, that women had been having babies since the beginning of time, that worrying would not help anything. Their 2nd son was born in August of 1891, in the middle of a heat wave that reminded Kieran viscerally of the day he had found Priscilla. They named him Thomas, after Priscilla's brother who had died on the wagon train, and Kieran saw tears of both grief and joy in his wife's eyes when she held their new son for the first time. "He would have loved this," she said, meaning her brother. "Loved seeing what we have built, what we have become." "Tell me about him," Kieran said, settling beside her. In all their years together, Priscilla had rarely spoken about her family, the pain still too fresh. So she told him stories of Thomas, of her father, of the mother she had lost to pneumonia. She talked until her voice grew hoarse, sharing memories she had kept locked away, and Kieran listened, holding her and letting her grieve properly for the first time. When she was finished, she looked lighter somehow, as if sharing the burden had eased it. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For being someone I can tell these things to, for being my partner in everything." "Always," he promised. With 3 children, the house suddenly felt smaller, so Kieran began planning an addition. They needed more bedrooms, a larger kitchen, maybe a proper dining room for when the family gathered. The work took most of 1892 to complete, but when it was done, the house had doubled in size and felt truly like a home that would hold generations. The ranch continued to prosper. Kieran now ran 500 head of cattle on expanded grazing land, and he had developed a reputation for breeding quality horses as well. Priscilla's enterprise had grown too. She now employed 2 women from nearby homesteads to help with the preserving and sowing, creating a small but profitable business that gave her independence and pride. On their 10th wedding anniversary in December of 1893, Kieran took Priscilla back to San Antonio for a weekend alone, leaving the children with Cookie, who had retired from trail driving and now lived in a small house on their property. They stayed at a nice hotel, ate at restaurants, attended a theater performance, and generally acted like the young couple they had once been. On the last evening, walking through the plaza where Kieran had first told Priscilla he wanted to marry her, she stopped and turned to face him. "Do you have any regrets?" she asked. "About how your life has turned out? You always talked about having a ranch, but I wonder sometimes if you miss the adventure of the trail drives, the freedom." Kieran thought about it honestly before answering. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it." Life was uncomplicated back then. "But Priscilla, what we have built together is worth more than any adventure. Coming home to you and the children, working land that belongs to us, building something that will last beyond our lifetimes. That is the real adventure. And I would not trade it for anything." She kissed him, right there in the plaza, just like he had kissed her 10 years earlier. "Good answer, Cowboy. I try." They returned home to find the children had been perfect for Cookie. The ranch was running smoothly, and life continued its steady march forward. Caleb was now 8, already talking about how he would run the ranch someday. Ruth was 6, serious and studious, always with a book in her hands. Thomas was 2, a whirlwind of energy who kept everyone on their toes. In 1895, tragedy struck when a drought hit Central Texas. Streams dried up, grass withered, and many ranchers lost substantial portions of their herds. Kieran and Priscilla struggled through it, hauling water from the creek that, mercifully, never ran completely dry, and buying feed they could barely afford to keep their cattle alive. It was the hardest year since they had started the ranch, and there were nights when Kieran lay awake wondering if they would make it. But they did, through a combination of careful management, hard work, and the help of neighbors who pitched in when things were most desperate. When the rains finally came in late fall, turning the prairie green again, Kieran felt like they had survived a war. "We will never be that close to the edge again," he told Priscilla. "I am going to set aside emergency funds, dig wells, plant drought-resistant grasses, whatever it takes." "We will figure it out together," she said, "just like we always do." The century turned, and with it came new challenges and opportunities. The railroad reached closer to their area, making it easier to ship cattle to market. New farming techniques and equipment became available. The children grew and changed, Caleb taking on more responsibility with the cattle, Ruth helping her mother with the accounts, Thomas showing signs of becoming a gifted horseman. In 1903, Kieran realized with a shock that he was 46 years old and Priscilla 43. 20 years had passed since he found her in the desert, and sometimes it felt like yesterday, and sometimes like a lifetime ago. They were sitting on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple when he said, "Do you remember the first thing I said to you?" Priscilla smiled, the lines around her eyes crinkling in the way he loved. "Easy now. Easy. You are safe." "And you asked for water." "Because I was dying of thirst. Your timing was impeccable." He took her hand, their fingers intertwining automatically. "I fell in love with you almost immediately, you know. I tried to tell myself it was just concern, just wanting to help, but I knew. The moment you opened those sage-colored eyes and looked at me, I was done for. I fell for you too. How could I not? You were my savior, my protector, and then my friend. By the time we reached San Antonio, I knew I never wanted to be apart from you." "We have had a good life," Kieran said. "A really good life." "The best," Priscilla agreed, "and we have many more years ahead of us. This is not an ending, just a milestone." She was right, of course. The ranch continued to thrive under their management and with Caleb's increasing involvement. Ruth married a young lawyer from San Antonio in 1905, bringing son-in-law Marcus into the family. Thomas, showing no interest in ranching, announced his intention to become a veterinarian, and Kieran and Priscilla supported his decision, proud of his ambition. In 1907, Caleb married a neighbor's daughter named Elizabeth, and they built a house on the far edge of the ranch property. Within a year, Kieran and Priscilla became grandparents when Elizabeth gave birth to a son they named Kieran, after his grandfather. Holding his namesake, Kieran felt the circle complete in a way he had not expected. "We did it," he told Priscilla that night. "We built something that will outlast us, a legacy." "We did it together," she corrected, "every step of the way." Ruth and Marcus gave them 2 granddaughters in quick succession. And suddenly, the ranch was full of children again, their laughter and energy bringing new life to the place. Sunday dinners became major events, with 3 generations gathering around the expanded table, sharing food and stories and love. As Kieran entered his 50s, he began to slow down physically, though he refused to admit it. Priscilla, ever practical, pointed out that he had good people working for him, including their own son, and that he did not have to prove anything to anyone. "You have earned the right to rest a little," she said, "to enjoy what you have built instead of killing yourself maintaining it." "I do not know how to rest," he admitted. "Then learn, for me. Because I want you around for a long time yet, and I do not want you working yourself into an early grave." So he learned, gradually, to delegate more, to trust Caleb's judgment, to take mornings off to ride with Priscilla through the land they loved. They talked about everything and nothing on those rides, sometimes falling into comfortable silence, simply being together in the place they had made their own. In 1910, on a spring morning much like the one when Caleb had been born, Kieran woke to find Priscilla crying softly beside him. He pulled her close immediately, alarmed. "What is wrong? Are you hurt?" "No," she said, laughing through her tears. "I am being foolish. I just woke up thinking about how lucky I am, how easily I could have died in that desert, and instead I got all of this. You, our children, our grandchildren, this life. It overwhelms me sometimes." He held her tighter. "I think about that too. How one decision, one choice to ride closer and investigate what I thought might be a pile of rags changed everything. If I had been riding a different position that day, if I had been distracted, if 1,000 things had been different, we never would have met. But you did ride closer, and here we are. Here we are," he agreed. They lay together as the sun rose, flooding the bedroom with golden light, and Kieran felt profoundly grateful for every moment, every choice, every struggle that had led them to this point. The years that followed were peaceful. The ranch ran smoothly under Caleb's management, while Kieran took on more of an advisory role. Thomas finished his veterinary training and opened a practice in San Antonio, though he visited the ranch regularly to tend to their stock. Ruth and Marcus had another child, a son, making 3 grandchildren from their line. Kieran and Priscilla traveled a little, taking a trip to California to see the land Priscilla's family had been heading toward all those years ago. It was bittersweet for her, but also healing, allowing her to complete a journey that had been interrupted by tragedy and then transformed into something entirely different. "My father would have liked you," she told Kieran as they stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. "He would have been happy to know I ended up with someone strong and good. I wish I could have known him, known all of them." "You carry them with you," she said. "In the ranch in our family, Thomas has my brother's name, Ruth has my mother's, they live on through us." In 1915, Kieran turned 58 and Priscilla 54. Their oldest grandson, young Kieran, was now 8 and showing signs of being as passionate about the ranch as his father and grandfather. Their granddaughters were growing into intelligent, independent young women. The newest grandson was a toddler, keeping everyone entertained with his antics. The ranch itself had grown beyond anything Kieran had imagined in those early days. They now ran nearly 1,000 head of cattle, employed a dozen hands full-time, and owned 3,000 acres of prime Texas grazing land. Priscilla's business had expanded to include a small store in San Antonio, where her preserves, quilts, and other goods were sold. They were not wealthy by the standards of the cattle barons to the north, but they were comfortable, secure, and respected. On a cool evening in December of 1915, the family gathered to celebrate Kieran and Priscilla's 33rd wedding anniversary. The house was full of people, noise, laughter, love. After dinner, Caleb stood and raised his glass. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the crowded room. "Who built all of this from nothing? Who taught us what it means to work hard, to love fiercely, to never give up? Everything we have, everything we are, we owe to them. To Mom and Dad." "To Mom and Dad," everyone echoed, and Kieran felt Priscilla's hand slip into his under the table. Later, after everyone had gone home or gone to bed, they sat on the porch in their favorite chairs, wrapped in blankets against the winter chill. The stars blazed overhead, vast and eternal, the same stars that had been shining the night Kieran proposed all those years ago. 33 years, Priscilla said wonderingly. Where did the time go? Into this, Kieran gestured at the ranch spread out before them in the darkness. Into our children, our grandchildren, into every fence post and water well and head of cattle. Into every meal shared and every conversation had. The time went into building a life worth living. You think, she said slowly, that everything happens for a reason, that I was meant to be on that trail, meant to nearly die, meant to be found by you specifically. Kieran considered the question. I do not know if I believe in fate in that way, but I believe we made the most of what happened. We took tragedy and turned it into something beautiful. Whether that was destiny or just us refusing to give up, I cannot say, but I am glad for every moment. Even the hard ones, especially the hard ones, they showed us what we are made of. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in peaceful silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Cattle lowing in the distance, horses shifting in the barn, the wind rustling through the mesquite. It was the sound of home, of a life well lived, of a love that had endured and deepened through decades. I love you, Kieran Ashford, Priscilla said softly. From that first moment when you gave me water until this moment right now and every moment yet to come, I love you. I love you too, Priscilla, my wife, my partner, my heart, always and forever. They sat on the porch until the cold drove them inside, and then they went to bed in the house they had built, on the land they had tamed, surrounded by the family they had created. In the morning they would wake and do it all again, working together, laughing together, facing whatever came their way together. Because that was what they did. That was who they were. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a life, a love, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And as Kieran drifted off to sleep with Priscilla warm beside him, he thought about that day in July of 1883, when he had ridden closer to investigate what might have been just a pile of rags. The best decision he had ever made. The moment that changed everything. The day he found the woman with hollow cheeks who would become the center of his world.